This video is sponsored by Nebula, the educational streaming service created by me and my creator friends. Check out the link in the description or stay tuned to learn more. Barcelona is a lovely seaside city in the Catalonia region of northeastern Spain, famous for its uniform blocks, fantastical architecture, and laid-back way of life. But Barcelona has far more lying just below the surface. The city has 2 metro systems, several rail operators, and even more, with over 200 stations scattered throughout. All of this means the confusion factor is high. It can be very hard for an outsider to appreciate how much exists and is going on in this most attractive European metropolis. You could say it's very much in need of an explainer video, so let's dive in. Hey there, and welcome to RMTransit, a channel about public transport networks around the world. Barcelona is a dense city squeezed between the mountains and the Mediterranean in northeastern Spain, and hemmed in by the Llobregat and Besós rivers that flow from the valleys to the north and roughly define the central parts of the city. The city is obviously famous for its wild buildings and spaces created or otherwise decorated by famous architect Antoni Gaudí, including the still under construction after over 100 years Sagrada Familia Church, Casa Mila, and Parc Güell. Of course, Barcelona has far more, from its superblocks to the famous La Rambla and Camp Nou, home to the famous FC Barcelona. There's also the hill of Montjuïc, which has gardens, a fortress, exhibition, and sporting grounds, and important for our purposes, a gondola and a funicular that opened in the 1920s for you to ride all the hillside transit to your heart's content. With a city as big as Barcelona, you're bound to have a number of major transport hubs, and indeed that's the case here. El Prat Airport, just to the west of the city, is one of Europe's most trafficked, with over 50 million passengers per year pre-COVID. But you come here for railways, and if you are arriving in Barcelona on high-speed rail, either from France or from the rest of Spain, which we discussed in our Spanish high-speed rail video, you'll arrive via Barcelona Sants station in the west side of the city. Sants also serves trains on the Rodalies regional and suburban train network, run mostly by Renfe, traveling through both of Barcelona's 2 cross-city regional rail tunnels, which remind me a lot of Hamburg, another city we talked about recently. The city is also getting a new high-speed rail station on the East End in the coming years. Barcelona also has modern trams, with 2 distinct mini networks in the west and east of the city, which despite the obvious value are still not connected together, although the gap is continuing to shrink. And there's actually another set of suburban rail services. These are run by Catalan railway company FGC, terminating at 2 points in the city centre at Plaça Espanya and Plaça Catalunya, turning these both into major railway hubs for the city and region as well. Diving into the metro, like some other cities such as Tokyo, Barcelona actually has lines run by multiple different operators, with FGC actually running a select few metro services, and the municipal TMB running most of the urban rail rapid transit. So let's talk about the system. Like in Madrid and actually the rest of Spain, all of the lines on Barcelona's metro system get their power from overhead rails and wires, and the TMB lines are also almost entirely underground, even including some major yards. However, unlike in the capital, Barcelona's network has trains with a couple different rail gauges. To start, let's look at the lines run by the Barcelona Metropolitan Transit Agency, or TMB, which is in charge of the city's original metro system. The first line we'll look at today is the Red Line 1, which first opened in the late 1920s and is 21 kilometers long with 30 stations, connecting to Sants, Espanya, and Catalunya. The line stretches east-west across the city, forming a broad letter M shape, and uniquely among the Barcelona metro lines, Line 1 actually operates on Iberian gauge tracks, the same as Spanish main lines and with larger trains than the rest of the metro as well. Even more unique, from Catalunya to Arc de Triomphe station, Line 1 trains share a quad-track tunnel with Renfe suburban trains, which run in the center tracks. To the east of the line, a large part of which runs parallel to the Renfe corridor, many stations are designed with the famous Spanish solution layout, with an island and side platforms, something which only really happens on Line 1, the most used in the system. Line 2 is purple and actually one of the newest lines on the network, being constructed in the 1980s for the 1992 Summer Olympics at Montjuïc, which the line didn't actually open in time for. Currently, Line 2 is 13 kilometers long with 18 stops, cutting across the city's southern end east-west, and crossing Line 1 twice. Like all other TMB lines besides Line 1, it features standard gauge tracks. Line 2 uses 5-car trains like all other TMB-operated metro lines, which are about 2.7 meters wide and 85 meters long. The oldest line in Barcelona's metro is the Green Line 3, built in the mid-1920s, which, like with Line 2, was built for a grand event, but in this case the World Fair of 1927. At the time, the line was known as El Gran Metro. Interestingly, Line 3 originally had a third rail for power, but this was actually replaced with overhead lines in the 90s. Line 3 has 26 stops over 18 kilometers of track, and like Lines 1 and 2, it's a broadly east-west line, but in this case forming a U-shape from the northwest of the city to the northeast, connecting to both Line 1 and Line 2 twice, and the city's 3 major railway stations. The connection to Line 2 at Parallel is cross-platform in one direction and also provides connections to the Montjuïc funicular. Line 4 is a 22-station, 17-kilometer yellow line which forms an almost complete loop in the east-central part of the city, crossing Line 1 and Line 2 twice, and coming close to Catalunya without connecting to it, and then heading north to the eastern terminus of Line 3. Originally, the central part of Line 4 passing by Catalunya was a branch of Barcelona's original metro line, the rest of which grew into Line 3. As in Madrid, part of Line 4 was previously removed and transferred to another line, in this case Line 2. Next up is Line 5, which is 19 kilometers long with 27 stops. The general shape of this line is quite similar to Line 4, but rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise. The line starts on Line 3 at its underground yard and then crosses Line 4 before grazing Lines 1 and 2 and heading west across the city north of the other lines, connecting to South Station and terminating to the northwest of the city. As it turns out, the line which was originally Line 2 was actually renamed to become Line 5. Probably the most infamous line or lines on the Barcelona Metro are Lines 9 and 10. I have an entire video dedicated to this line and the unique way its tunnels and stations are designed because it's truly like nothing else in the world, so you should check that out. If you're confused about why I'm talking about them together, Lines 9 and 10 are actually mostly on the same alignment through the city center. It's only on the outer branches that the two services diverge. When fully complete, Lines 9 and 10 will have nearly 50 kilometers of track, almost entirely underground, besides a short segment of elevated running on the western Line 10 branch, operating fully automated trains and stations with full platform screen doors. But for now, the line is broken into two legs, in the west and the east, with the central section left unopened. Broadly, the idea of the Line 9 and 10 alignment is to provide an orbital route within the city, traveling east-west across it, farther north than any other line, providing additional connections. It will also help fix a bunch of other problems, like better integrating the FGC and TMB metro lines by adding connections to the very radial FGC metro services with stations connecting to Lines 6, 7, 8, and 12, and adding an airport connection to El Prat. There's also a planned station at Camp Nou, very useful if you're going to an FC Barcelona game. The last line in the TMB system is Line 11, and it is absolutely the strangest metro line on Barcelona's network. It's just about 2.5 kilometers long with 5 stations, and the line has small 2-car trains that initially operated with drivers but are now fully automated with platform screen doors at all stations. The line also long had a cross-platform transfer with Line 4, which Line 11 is a virtual extension of, akin to some of the metro lines in Madrid. Just like in Madrid, Line 11 has been designed such that it could be converted to an extension of Line 4 in the future. And, interestingly, it's almost all single track, with double-track passing loops only at 2 of its 5 stations. The second component of Barcelona's metro are the lines run by FGC, and I must say I am really fond of FGC's logo. It's definitely one of the best out there for a railway. What can make Barcelona's system confusing, and honestly also just frankly unique, is that even though FGC's lines are officially part of the metro, that wasn't always the case, and they aren't exclusively metro lines. Instead, FGC has 2 main interurban-derived suburban rail corridors which dead end into Barcelona from the west and the north, and the high-frequency local stop services on these corridors that terminate closest to the city center have been treated as metro lines for the last few decades. On signs they're denoted with an L and then a number, while other FGC services get an S or an R and then a number. FGC's routes comprise 4 of the metro lines on this system. The first of the interurban lines is the Barcelona-Valles line, which has its origins over a century ago and runs to the region of Valles north of the city. This route was traditionally Iberian gauge but was converted to standard gauge with overhead line power at 1500 volts DC. The line terminates at Plaza Catalunya, which has 5 stub-end tracks for the Valles line, although not all of them are used. The operation is super impressive because all of the different services, including the S-lines, make up more than 30 trains per hour which turn at the station. The stopping pattern for the S-lines has actually been simplified since the end of 2022, cutting the total number of S services from 5 to just 2, which don't stop at several stations already served by the metro services, albeit with the removal of what was a previous skip-stop service, hopefully all improving reliability. Today, the Valles line forms 3 metro lines on Barcelona's network. The first 2 of these are lines 6 and 7, which have 8 stations over 4.5 kilometers of track and 7 stations over 4 kilometers of track respectively, making them very short and stop-dense. Oddly for a metro line, line 6 currently only runs off-peak, leaving capacity for the S1 and S2 services that make these same stops within Barcelona. Line 7 travels from Catalonia to the north before the rest of the line diverges west along with line 6, which terminates a few stations further along. Line 7 has very steep sections and uses 3-car trains with a slightly smaller loading gauge than the 80-meter 4-car trains used on the other services. The only connections from lines 6 and 7 to the rest of the metro and the Rodales happen at Catalonia, as well as to the metro at Provincia, one of the busiest stations in the city, making the lines pretty radial. It is also worth mentioning that unlike a lot of the trains on the TMB portion of the metro, many of the trains used on these services are actually really attractive and distinctive looking models from CAF, Alstom, and Stadler. There's also line 12, which is the shortest line on the Barcelona metro, running underground just 1 station and 600 meters from Sarria on line 6 and in the future line 9 and 10. Funnily enough, the route of line 12 traces an old urban rail line service from the mid-1800s, which was later buried and was the final segment of line 6 in the 1970s, which it was split from in 2016. Line 12 now operates as a shuttle. This conversion allowed the reconfiguration of Sarria with larger platforms and more capacity. The second FGC corridor is the line from Barcelona to Llobregat and Anoia, which also has over century-old origins and runs to the west of the city. Unlike the Valles line, this line features only 1 metro service and a lot more suburban and regional services, and even freight service in some areas. This line is actually meter gauge with 1500-volt DC overhead lines, meaning Barcelona's urban railways indeed operate on 3 different gauges, with España station actually serving all 3. Like the Valles line, this line ultimately continues into 2 long branches. Line 8 is 12 kilometers long with 11 stations traveling west from España station and terminating in a suburb shortly after crossing the Llobregat River west of the city. Unlike with the Valles line, the S services almost all stop at the same stations as Line 8, significantly increasing the effective frequency of the service. Line 8 has a number of connections to the Barcelona metro as well as Rodales services. All in all, the FGC routes are very interesting, albeit highly radial, limiting their usefulness for travel within the densest parts of Barcelona. At the same time, because of their interurban origins and generally suburban nature, much of FGC's lines are above ground. As you might imagine, given the situation with Line 9 and 10, Barcelona has a lot of metro expansion still in the pipeline, with work slowly moving along on this central tunnel and plans to complete this long-delayed line by the middle of the decade. What's fascinating is that at the moment, the tracks used by the eastern parts of lines 9 and 10 to access La Sagrera are not the permanent tracks. They're actually part of an extension of line 4 to the site. Being able to use them for lines 9 and 10 is a big benefit of so many of the metro lines using intercompatible trains in Barcelona. Planning is also ongoing for automating line 2 of the metro and connecting it to the line 9 airport branch. This will connect both lines 9 and 10 south of their western split and provide more service to the airport, including a direct connection to the city center. Line 8 of the FGC network will actually also be extended further into the city to connect to the FGC's lines 6 and 7 and fill the void space between the older TMB lines and lines 9 and 10. All in all, Barcelona has a lot planned to help better integrate its metro networks and better connect all of its neighborhoods. An exciting period that reminds me a lot of when the MTR and KCR in Hong Kong merged. What's clear to me is that Barcelona is just one of those cities with an especially interesting railway network, and one that cities around the world have lots to learn from. Now, if you've made it to the end of this video, you must be at least a little bit interested in how the world's transit systems work, and enjoy learning about topics like public transit and infrastructure in depth. If that sounds like you, Wendover Productions' new Nebula original series, The Logistics of X, might just be the right thing to watch right after this, with the first episode centered on ski resorts and everything that goes into keeping one of these popular destinations afloat. And this series, like other Nebula originals, is only available on Nebula. Nebula is the streaming platform owned by me and my creator friends, featuring over 14,000 titles that you can watch ad-free, including exclusive and early access videos from educational creators like myself, Not Just Bikes, City Nerd, and City Beautiful. Lots of urbanist content. Now, you can also get Nebula classes absolutely free with your base Nebula subscription, and learn from all of your favorite subject matter experts so you too could be a master in your craft. This is one of the best ways you can support my channel and my content as a whole, and now you can get a Nebula subscription for as low as $2.50 a month or $30 annually, so go check out Nebula now. A special thank you to Akane, Mario, and Pal for their footage and comments which helped make this video.